Hey YouTube, it's Dimitri, and today we're going to do a quick video, just introduction here to R, a little bit of terminology, just a few examples of how to kind of put data in, but let's dive on in. So we're going to start off here and we're going to create some variable. We're just going to call this A, and we're going to assign it a vector. So you can use an equal sign, but it's not best practice. Many of you are going to ask why. It's because sometimes it doesn't actually work given the structure of R, but we're not going to cover that today. So we're going to use a left arrow with the line here, so it's a less than dash, but this will assign some value. And we're going to create a vector. A vector is more or less just like a list or a grouping of numbers or of characters, a grouping of something. We'll cover those in another video. But simply put here, we're just going to say, okay, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to go to the end here and just hit enter. And this will create, if you look up here on the right, A. And it's going to tell you these are numbers, they're numeric, and they go from 1 to 5. So this 1 to 5 here just indicates that there are 5 elements. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So for example, if you were to create another one, called 2, 4, 6, 8. We'll just create that. It'll tell you again here it's 1 to 4, meaning there's only 4 elements in this vector, and these are 2, 4, 6, and 8. So the C here stands for concatenate, and each individual number in this case is going to be one element, and everything in R functions in vector kind of realm. So for example here, we have this A, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Each one of these numbers actually represents a 1 unit vector. And it's handy to see here on the top right, as I indicated, that A and B are actual values. But let's say you're not using RStudio, which is what I am using up here, and you want to actually print it to see if A actually saved as you expected. So you can just type in A and then just hit enter, and it will print out 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which is the vector of A exactly as we expected. Now let's say we want to know a specific number within the vector. So we have this vector A, and we want to pull the third number in the vector here. The way to do this is put A, and then you put a square bracket, and you put the number that you want to pull here. So I want to pull the third number in this vector. And again, you press enter, and it'll tell you it's 3. Again, if we wanted to do B, but we wanted to pull the third number in this vector, it will pull 6. Because you can see the first one is 2, second one's 4 here, and then the third one is going to be 6. So one thing to note, if you're actually coming from another language, for example, C or C++, these actually start counting from 0. So in C++, instead of being 6, this number would have been 8, because it would have been 0, 1, 2, 3, and that would have been the third one. In R, we start counting from 1. We do not start counting from 0. So everything is technically indexed from 1, which is something just a little different to get used to when you start here. Now, something else that's a little bit handy is, let's say I want to select multiple numbers within this list. So let's say I want to select the end of A. So I want to select 3, 4, and 5, for example. I want to select the third, fourth, and fifth values of A. To do this, it would just be A, square brackets, and then 3, semicolon, to 5. And that will get you 3, 4, and 5. So again, it pulls this range. Again, we can do something different. We could do B and do 1 to 2. And this will get us the first 2 numbers in the vector of B. All right, so something that's actually useful and handy is if you want to subset something, or you want to do some calculation, or you want to do some command and you want to save that value, you can easily do that by setting it equal to that value. So for example, here we had A and we took the third through the fifth vector. We're going to take, again, we'll call it X, and we'll assign here A 3 through 5. Okay, again, in RStudio, you can look up here on the right and see that it actually did save 3, 4, and 5, which were the last 3 of A. But it saves them into a new vector called X. And again, it tells you there's 1 to 3, so there's actually 3 total vector elements inside of this vector. Again, if you wanted to really convince yourself, you can type in X and it will print out those values. So something in all statistical languages and programming in general is that there are built-in functions. For example, the mean, you can take the mean of X, which we were just looking at here, and it'll tell you it's 4. So again, if you added up 3, 4, and 5, you'd end up with 12. And if you took 12 and divided it by 3 to get the average here, you end up with 4. You can also do standard deviation of X. So that gives us 1. Again, you can do standard deviation of all kinds of different things. So standard deviation of the vector A is 1.581139. This looks a little more exciting than 1. And as I mentioned before, we can assign things. So let's say that I want to call this the standard deviation of A. We can do this and just do the standard deviation of A as we mentioned before. But again, we're going to save it to this new value we're going to call SD_A. I should note too, when you use functions, you use parentheses here. You're not going to use the square brackets. And again, it saves it, and you can see up here in the top right, it saved 1.58111. But you notice before when we calculated this, it didn't save it, it just prints the value. So if you do want to save them, you're gonna have to set them equal to some other value. So this is called an assignment. You're assigning the standard deviation of A to SD_A. Okay, so something else kind of fun and unique about R here is that there are built-in data sets. Most statistical languages and most programming languages have some sort of data sets available that you can play with. If you'd like to see them all, you can actually type in data, and then it will print you this massive list. It's actually going to put this in a new window here in the top, and it's going to show you all these different data sets that are available to you to play with. So we're just going to pick one of these to use because we want to kind of just play around with it a little bit and see what's available. There's way too many here, so I'm just going to pick the BOD data set here. And again, we can do our basic calculations. So you can take like the mean of BOD. I'm trying to take the mean here of this data set called BOD. The issue it's telling you, so it's an example of the warning. So it's going to say NA, not applicable. It can't return this. It's going to give you a warning message here. It's going to say the augment is not numerical or logical. So this is important because what it's telling you is that there's multiple columns. So it can't actually take the mean of multiple columns because you're not telling it exactly what to do here. So reading errors is an important part of R. A lot of times they'll make sense like this, but there are occasions, probably more frequently than you would think, that the warning messages just make no sense. If that's the case, if you go on Google, you can search it. R's documentation is pretty good, and there's a large community of people out there that are pretty willing to help, and most people have already asked the questions that you're going to have. So it's helpful to go online and find these answers if you need them. And something just to note here is a lot of times you'll end up typing all this code and it becomes very messy. So there's like a lot of stuff in here and I want it gone. If you hit Control, so CTRL on the keyboard, and you hold that down and click L, it will clear the screen. And now you have a fresh screen that you can work in. So we're going to take the mean here of a data set. It's called Nile. And it will give you the Nile mean here, which is 9.1935. We want to know what this looks like though, so you can actually type in Nile and hit enter, and it will print it out and show you it's a time series as a start date, end date, and then this is the Nile. This is the data it's going to be calculating. One thing I want to point out here so people aren't confused is the numbers in the brackets are indicating exactly which element of that vector you're on. So this first one here is going to be 1. It starts at 1, and then it goes all the way through 17. So if you count them, right, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So just to prove to you guys here, the next one's going to be the 18th one, and then it'll be the 35th, the 52nd, the 69th, and the 86th. And when we're operating inside of R, I like to see everything up here in the top right, global environment. So we could actually assign this to something. We could call this data, or I'll call this test data. And we'll assign Nile to that. And then it will actually save it up here called test data. And it will show you that there are 1 to 100. So there are 100 observations. And again, it just saves it so it's easier to see and to remember what we're working with. And to wrap this video up here, one more cool thing is that you can do different types of graphs and charts inside of R. There are all kinds of really cool interactive charts and designing you can do. We'll hopefully cover that in a video down the road. But histograms are something simple to do. So we want to do a histogram of the Nile data set. We renamed it test data. You could also just type in Nile if you wanted. But if you click enter, it'll print this chart on the bottom right here where all your plots are. There are tabs to change and look at different things. Just make sure you're on the plots tab if it doesn't automatically come up. But it will give you this really cool histogram, and there's really nothing you have to do. But that's just a very basic introduction to the workings of R. At this point, you might not see a lot of value added because we're doing things that are so simple, but I'm hoping you'll start realizing everything is done in vectors in R. This is what makes the language very unique compared to other languages, for example, like C++ or Python, or even SAS, for example. But everything is vectorized. It's not too challenging to use once you get going. There's just little quirks we're going to learn throughout these lessons. And if you wanted to quit your session, you can just type in Q, because Q is actually a function. And you can hit enter, and it'll say save this workspace to image, yes or no. You can hit yes or no. I'm going to hit no, and then hit enter, and it will close out. Anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, until next time.